Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dual Access Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Kriebel, and today I've got a very special guest with me, Rob Gibbons. He is currently the Chief Commercial Officer at Acutus Technologies. But before we talk about that and all of his vast sales experience, we have to jump right into the fun stuff, and that's basketball. So Rob is an absolute giant, and he's actually the first professional athlete I've ever interviewed. So, Rob, well, you're still a professional athlete.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So you can still tell people you're a professional athlete. You
Yeah,
just don't get paid to be an athlete now.
that's right. Yeah, I don't.
So you have to make your own money now.
Yeah.
So I have to start with that. So, first off, how tall are you?
6'10".
Holy crap. I didn't realize you were 6'10". So you're an absolute giant.
Well, yeah, in some capacity, yeah. If I'm on
You're a lot shorter than the guy that's on the Mavericks. What's his name?
Wembley. No, he's on the Spurs. On the Spurs.
Or Spurs, yeah. And he plays like a point. And he plays like a point guard.
He's 7'4". Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah. Could you ever dribble like him?
Yeah, I can dribble pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
In college and in the pros, I was a power forward, so I had to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you had to be able to dribble. But traditionally, I think of the NBA center and the college centers as just these big oafs that stand in the middle and don't do a whole lot. But the game's changed a lot.
Yeah, I was just going to say the game is dramatically changed because now what you're seeing, and it's interesting because he's at kind of the epitome of it now, right? But the big men of today aren't like the big men when we were watching the game.
No, not at all.
Shaqs, the Patrick Ewings, the Karl Malones.
Yeah.
That breed of basketball players is you don't see it as much anymore. Back to the basket, as we call it in the game.
And that kind of started with Kevin Durant, I would think. He was one of the first big men that really made it more obvious, I guess.
Well, it's funny, but Kevin Durant, but also it was really ushered in. If you want to go back, if you're a basketball nerd, you want to go back. The person who really introduced that to the league was Phil Jackson, because if you remember when Mike was playing, Scotty and those guys, there were a lot of times, even though they had Wennington and Cartwright and those guys, a lot of times on the floor they were playing with 4 forwards and a guard. Because keep in mind, Mike ran the 2 or the 3. Scotty, they're both 6'7". So that kind of. But the real introduction was when the European Pro League started to get so good. And then, if you remember, before Durant, it was a guy named Dirk Nowitzki. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about Dirk. Yeah.
I stood next to Dirk. Dirk's taller than me, and Dirk can play like a guard.
Yeah,
like a guard.
And he came from Europe. Yeah,
and he came from Germany. That's right.
Yeah.
So then, since then, the game is really focused on more skill positions and such like that. Where nowadays, if you're a big man, and I know this because of my kids and my friends' kids, you're a big man. If you can handle and if you can shoot, you're kind of starting from a tougher spot than most.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. What was your free throw percentage? What's your career free throw percentage?
In college, it was low to mid 80s. But then usually I hovered around there. In the pros, it was better because I made more of a point to get better at it. I was good at it in college. I would have liked to have been better.
Yeah.
I would say mid to low 80s in college.
I mean, I know that's a really good percentage, but it still seems like, this is a free throw. You're 10 feet away.
Yeah.
Why are players why isn't everybody like Steph Curry when they shoot?
Yeah. No, it's a good point because a lot of it has to do, I'll be honest with you, a lot of it has to do with mechanics and confidence. Yeah. Because the best shooters, if you watch Steph Curry, for instance, watch him in a game, they do the exact same things every time they shoot that foul shot, right? It's just muscle memory. And also, don't get me wrong, it's like a lot of things. It's tons of practice.
Yeah.
And early on, if you don't have somebody correct your form or your mechanics, you can get into some really bad habits that are really hard to break.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. What's frustrating me, it's funny you say that because now with my sons all play. And when we watch college games, big time college games, even pro games, it nauseates me when I see guys go to the line and not only do they miss bad. Right? Yeah. So that part to me is mind boggling.
I mean, you see some of them that are better 3-point shooters than they are free throw shooters.
Oh,
it's like, how's that possible?
You get on Shaquille O'Neal because he's such a bad free throw shooter. But if you know Shaquille O'Neal, if you ever really read this, he shattered his wrist when he was very, very young, like smash it. And his right wrist, he can only bend back so far. So when you're in a free throw, you need that.
That's why he pushes it, I guess, right?
Yeah, he's almost throwing it. And I try to equate this because I met him and I watched him do this. It's like you and I trying to throw a baseball or a golf ball through the hoop, right?
Right.
Really, the form you can't really use. You've got to be like a dart.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So, but he really improved his percentage when he started shooting underhanded.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that still never caught on enough. You know what I mean?
But when you look at physics studies of basketball, that's by far the best way to shoot a free throw. Like Pistol Pete shot that way.
Well,
he was like
George,
99% free throw shooter.
well, and George
like
Mikan. George Mikan was one of the few big men to really revolutionize the game, and for a while he did the same. He shot underhand.
So why do you think players don't do it? Because they're going to get made fun of?
That could be a very key reason. Nowadays, so many of us are so vain. God forbid you shoot a free throw underhanded. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be something because nowadays, especially the way information and media travels, people will get destroyed. You know, and TikTok and whatever they use nowadays, you show someone shoot an underhanded free throw. But the truth be told, if you look at guys like you had brought up earlier, and it's a great example. When Steph Curry first came to the league, he wasn't Steph Curry that he is now.
No, not even close.
Most people don't know where he went to college. He went to a small college, liberal arts college.
Right?
Went to Davidson.
Yeah.
Now, to his credit, prior to that, in and around that area, people knew him. But on the national scene, nobody really knew him.
Yeah.
But he had a great NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
He turned heads. But then, to his credit, when he got to the league, he got the right shooting coach. He got the right trainers, and and now it's just a matter of discipline, doing. But so many guys. I'll give you another example. Look at Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant was at, you know where Kevin Durant went to college?
No.
Most people don't. He went to Texas.
Okay.
And he
I
didn't
never
really
think of Texas having a half decent basketball team.
Exactly. But when he gets to the league, a friend of mine, actually, a guy that I worked with, who's now moved back to the area, he's been Kevin Durant's shooting coach for like the last 7 years. His name's Adam Harrington. And just think of that. He's had a shooting coach for the last 7 years. You know, all these guys that are big time, when they make that transition to see that they can go from good to really great and lasting power, they have trainers, they have shooting coaches, all these things. And the very first thing they do is, listen, you've got to work on the mechanics.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the foundation, it's an uphill battle from there.
Yeah. Well, and I guess some players probably think, well, you know, should I really be spending that money on something like that? Right. They don't think about the long-term value of, you know, so the money that Durant and Steph Curry have invested in these specialized coaches, that's peanuts, you know, because they would have never gotten the contracts they got, right? And the endorsement deals, all this stuff that goes along with it, they would have never gotten any of that if it wasn't for these coaches. Yeah, that's
right. They would the coaches and the discipline. I will say that because you have to have just gut wrenching, no matter what you have to do all the time. But to their credit, the NBA, as poorly as I think it's run on some instances, what it does do a good job of, and the last couple of years it's really highlighted, is those players who come in at one level. They fortify themselves, they build that foundation, and they get better and better. Another great example in my house, my wife is Greek. My kids are half Greek, so we love Giannis. Look at pictures of when Giannis first came into the league. It's like Steph Curry. He wasn't really knowable. He didn't really do much, but he got better and better every single year.
Yeah.
Now he's probably one of the top 5 players in the game right now.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there's also those guys, Andy, that we all know that had all the talent in the world to get to the league, and you're like, what the hell happened? So,
too many of those.
Yeah, and that still happens. Yeah, right. At too high of a clip.
Yeah. So what's been the biggest change in basketball since you played?
Great question. I think it's been I don't want to say the systematic eradication of the big man, back to the basket big man. Now, that said, I do have hope on the horizon because I'm very fortunate. I played for a gentleman in Jersey named Bobby Hurley. He taught me how to play the game. I didn't go to St. Anthony's, but everything else he taught me how to do, and he helped me get in college. And I had a wonderful college coach. But back when I played in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was still big man, forwards, guard, and stuff. And if you look at UConn now, UConn won the national championship last year, and they have that mentality. They have big men. They have a 7-footer. They have big banger guys. That's, I hope, coming back. But it's funny because in the NBA and in college, you see too much of this 3-man weave up top with guards, and then it's all about slashing. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because basketball enthusiasts will tell you, but it's a scoring race. You know, you look at some of the scores of these NBA games, you're wondering did anybody show up to play defense at all? It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, the average score, I think of the Golden State games, it was 110 they're averaging. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. The offenses, I guess, are they steal ideas off of everybody else that's doing it, right? Sure. So, they're all running the triangle offense now because it worked for the Bulls, but you still have to have the players to execute it. That's and one of the other really interesting things is this is where data comes into basketball.
100%.
It's become a bigger and bigger part of basketball, especially the way teams are run and the way players play is the medium range jump shot doesn't exist anymore, more or less, right? It's it's worth the risk to take a 3-pointer. So if you look at the number of 3-pointers taken, really it kind of follows along with Steph Curry's career.
Yeah, and it's to your point, it's skyrocketing. You could say you set a watch to it by Steph, Kevin Durant, those guys that are just, even Klay Thompson. I don't know if you watch form-wise, Klay Thompson's an unbelievable shooter.
Yeah.
It's funny because, you bring up data into it, right? And I'm quietly, I think we're both data nerds, right? Data has changed the game significantly, but not just in basketball.
Yeah.
So I have a thing now that when I was fortunate enough to work with this one guy, he was my head of sales operations. It's called Wags. He was also a math whiz. And I read the book Moneyball by Michael Lewis. And I came into Wags and I said, hey, can you Moneyball the sales force with me? And it was interesting because we just, instead of looking at certain KPIs with our sales team, we extended it and drew it out. And sure enough, it was literally night and day, the results we got. So when you think about it, the guy that did it, Billy Beane, did it for Oakland.
Yeah.
That concept, the Red Sox won the World Series 2 years later by doing that exact concept,
Yeah.
Whereas, and basketball is falling victim to that. NFL is the same way.
Yeah.
Business is the exact same way, that kind of thing where let's look at the data and see what's having the highest impact. Because you listen, as early as I started playing, the worst shot in basketball is your foot on the 3-point line.
Right.
That's always stated.
Yeah.
But the matter is now, if you get X amount of attempts, you'd rather have X amount of attempts from the 3-point line than you would the 2-point line, because if they're even, we're going to win on the former side.
Yeah.
But I agree. Data has taken over, not taken over, but it's played a significant role. There's also times though when it plays too much of a role. Because personally, I'll give you something that bothers me that I had a discussion about recently. Have you heard about these players' load management? Have you heard that now in the NBA?
Well, you hear of it in soccer a lot. Yeah, where you can only play so many minutes. And you see it in baseball now with pitchers. They throw like 50 pitches. When I played baseball, if I used to throw 200 in a game.
Exactly. But the thing that frustrates me about the NBA is that I played with a couple of the big-time old NBA guys. I was fortunate. I was on a team with Magic Johnson in Sweden for a while. I played around guys in Jersey that, had been to the league and came back to work out. And I see it from a fan's perspective, I guess, right? Because think about this. I grew up just outside New York City, and still to this day, I think that the New York Knicks might be the most expensive ticket in the NBA. So what happened in the NBA is they eradicated majority of their blue-collar fan base years ago, right?
Yeah.
Problem is now with load management, you play an 82-game season, okay? And now there's so many different ways to take care of your body. There's so much technology, science. They all fly private. Keep back in the day when Larry and Magic and Mike were doing it, they were still flying commercial to a good extent. Right?
Yeah.
And nowadays, think about it. If you and your kids are going to a game in New York City, you spend all this money to go see this guy play, only to find out that he's now not playing tonight because he wants to save himself up for 2 months down or a month down the line.
Right.
It kind of, I don't know. It's not like the season added games. You know what I'm saying? Like you have more of an argument to do that in the NFL because let's face it, you need a week to recover. My God, it's like you hit a truck, right? And anytime they add a game, I'm like, oh my God, because I've seen guys suffer from CTE and all that. But like in the NBA, I just have an issue with that. You know what I mean? It's the greatest, from a basketball perspective, it's the mecca. It's the greatest job in the world. You get to play, you're paid handsomely to do something that you absolutely love. Nowadays, the guy, even the furthest guy on the bench who never sees the court, he's making millions. You know what I mean? So it's like, when I hear about that, I'm like, all right, is there a level of something that's on a bigger scale? The aesthetics of it to where it just doesn't show right because people fight to get those tickets. These kids boost up to see you. You're a hero to a lot of those kids. And then you found out that you're on the bench in a suit because you want to save up your energy. To me, it's like part of the job is you're supposed to take care of your body. You're supposed to spend that money with the best trainers. Yeah. So I have an issue with that. I think data may have played a role in that. But quiet.
Possibly. Yeah. But is it, I guess it's part of it's maybe players trying to extend their careers. It's overthinking things.
100%.
Right. But how much of that is just the mentality of the players? Do they just not love the game as much as they used to?
It's a good question. It's a great
it's
question.
Just business to a lot of them sometimes, I guess, right?
I think I'll say that I don't think it's a lack of the love. I think it's more of the business. That could be it too.
Right.
But to your point, the great art, and you hit it on the head. You're spot on in that. The good players, they're doing this, the way they rationalize it is justifiable. Listen, I want to save up for the playoffs. Listen, even back in the day, I want to say early, mid-90s, Popovich used to do that with David Robinson and Tim Duncan and stuff like that. Save a few bodies because you're going to go deep in the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, it's an 82-game season, right? And that's not a small number of games. And then the playoffs are, 20-something other games.
Yeah.
Deep into the playoffs, you've hit the 100 mark. Yeah, you're going to get – even in college, we don't play a fraction of many games, right? But I can tell you the first 2 or 3 years I was with my head coach, and it was his first head coaching job. And the first 2 years, he would practice us as hard in as hard in February as he did October. By late February, we had nothing left. So I understand that part of it, right? But to your point, you wonder, I hope it's not because they don't appreciate and love the game as much. I hope it's more of a business thing. And if it is because of the right reasons, whether they want to be fresh for the playoffs and have some legs, then God bless them. I just hate the fact that I know there's some kid at the end of it. And Kobe Bryant used to talk about that. That's why Kobe Bryant rarely ever
tried out. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, listen, this kid comes to see me. It may be the only chance he ever gets, So maybe it is a business thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked a bit about, the how you guys, it sort of relates to sales at your company now and how you use data in sales and things. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in the work that I do is, performance management, right? And, you talk about it in the terms of athletics, but companies have performance metrics and things. And you talk about sales, because you're in sales, you talk about sales metrics. And I get in discussions all the time about, well, what are the most important metrics for a business to monitor, right? And the answer is always, it depends. But in that, companies have a lot of the data is the same as far as sales is concerned, right?
As far as the KPIs they keep, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, so, if you were starting a new business, let's say I'm starting a new business, what are the most important sales KPIs I should look out for?
So in terms of now, to your point, it does have a relatable concept towards your business, right? If I'm on the basic surface, because I have an idea about the business that you're starting, I would suggest that if it were me, one of the things I would look at very first and foremost is how many meetings am I having in a week that could turn into potential opportunities, and of that, what's the conversion rate of those, and what am I what's going into those, and how do I tweak those? So let me give you an example. When I get called into companies let me give it this way, I don't get the call that usually says, "Hey, Rob, things are going great. We're breaking through the ceiling with numbers. We're going to IPO in 2 years. Why don't you come over?" I never get that call. I get the call like in the middle of the night, red button, red bat phone, kind of like, "Hey, we just got a whole boatload of capital, but that was 18 months ago. And now we were looking for our Series B or C, and sales team's struggling. We flatlined on revenue. Net new accounts are low, and we're bleeding customers." That's a call I usually get, right? Now, I'm a little bit masochistic because that's also the call I love getting, because I get to go in there and be the hero and the fixer. But if you're just to go back to what you're saying, if I'm early in a business, there's 4 things I look at when I go into these businesses. And it's usually early on, A, B round. You can look at average ticket price, right? Your conversion rate, your booking rate, and then your cost of acquisition. If you can focus in, you've got really clear numbers on those things: average ticket price, conversion rate, booking rate, and cost of acquisition. I can usually tell you with pretty good accuracy what you need to pour on, where you need to tweak the dial, where you need to spend money to increase lead gen, to increase sales, and things like that.
Right.
From a human standpoint, you just implement those onto the heads that you have, and you break down into smaller metrics how to get to those. That makes sense.
Right. So, but let's say you're in a company that all that stuff's kind of, you got those things established, and you're just kind of doing the routine monitoring of company metrics. What metrics do you focus on typically?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So usually those 4 are big with me, but then I usually carry retention is huge with me. You have to keep on retention, because there's 2 reasons, right? If you can't retain customers, you're a slow dying ship anyway, slow sinking ship. And retention, which usually should be, especially in the tech world, should be about mid-90s, right? And then net new business, net new revenue, right? It's one thing to get, if you have the ability to get customers, great, half the problem is solved. But the real issue is that can you hold on to those customers? Because the secret is that the best customer is always an existing customer. So if you look at the metrics, the current company I work with is a biotech company, it's a diagnostic company, and Acutus. And what we do is the work rate of my team has to be exceptionally high. And when I say work rate, I mean they're all remote, they're all out in the field. And this is a sale where they're face to face all day long, right? They work with providers. And your work rate has to be exceptionally high. Otherwise, you noticeably will fall behind very quickly. So to give you an example, each of them is responsible for a number of meetings, but also how many new providers they bring on a month. And of those new providers, how many are actually sending and using our services, right? So they're aggressive. They have to each bring on 8 new accounts a month. And of those new accounts, 4 of them have to be already buying from us, already selling, already using our services, which is uber aggressive. So give you the metrics on it. You break that down day to day. Every one of my field reps now has a lunch booked every day. The best ones probably are booked out. This is December. They're booked out to February.
Right.
And on top of that meeting lunch, they've got to hit 8 to 10 cold call offices in person a day.
Right. Right.
Now, when you think about that, that's not for a guy like me. I'm an older guy. I'm not doing that, banging down those doors. That's for kids that are young, hungry, smart. That kind of Salesforce. In the tech world, there's metrics or net new meetings, net new business meetings, and then in those meetings, how good are you at really putting together a pipeline?
Yeah.
And the real hardcore part of sales is that can you live and build a pipeline that's actually based in reality?
Yeah. And how do you know if a metric is doing good or bad? So, you see a number, somebody gives you a number, it says, Rob, our conversion rate is, I don't know, 5%. I don't know if that's good or bad, right? They tell you it's 5%. Do you ever give those numbers context, whether it's good or bad?
I do.
Compare to?
Yeah, I try to give them context. So usually I keep a really good finger on the pulse of what's industry standard, right?
Okay.
And then what you try to do is when you go into any environment, you take industry standard and you put a hedge on it, to kind of cushion yourself. But give you an example. So for retention in the tech world needs to be around mid-90s, right?
Okay.
That's industry standard. So when you get into a situation that's below 90%, you're already in trouble, right?
Right.
And anything below than that, any good process you have, any good system you have can bump that up a little bit. You're going to want to put gas on that because, like I said, if you can't hold on to the customers, the boat's already sinking. You're plugging holes, that kind of thing. But when it also comes to that, like I said, I always like to look at net new business, and I like to look at the activity level of my team. So, for instance, if my sales leaders are cranking out great deals and they're driving a lot of revenue, you may have a situation where they're not nearly as valuable as the one that's driving close to that amount of money, but that's bringing on twice as many customers. To give you an example, the reason why I moneyball my sales force, and I have about 20, 30 metrics that we look at, the reason why I do that is because too many sales forces and too much leadership in tech and business, they look at the guy who grosses the highest level of money, right? And that's fine. But you also need to take into account a very few key particular metrics that indicate whether or not that person's still valuable to you. So let me give you an example. So if you and I are working at a company together, I've been there 5 years, you've been there a year and a half. And at the end of the year, at the end of 2023, we both brought in about $5 million. Who's more valuable to that company? Right?
I would say probably me, because I did it only a year and a half.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that I started paying attention to when we started moneyballing these sales forces that most leaders in sales do not do, of those metrics that we talk about, net new meetings, business meetings, follow, all this stuff, you have to keep in mind how long that salesperson, girl, man or woman, has been with the company, right? Because that essentially is affecting your bottom line through and through. The guy who brings in the same amount of money as the girl that's only been here 2 months, that's a huge loss, right? The company's spending tons and tons of money. That's one big thing that I've implemented the last, I want to say 4 companies I've gone. And it's funny, I can tell you personally, Andy, at 2 of those companies were both very big tech companies. Once we moneyballed the sales force, in both instances, the number one guy at the company ended up on the value chart being so far down that once they got word of this and they were exposed to this, and what was exposed was that they really weren't doing the work, they were getting handed these deals, they soon left. They get exposed and they leave. Or there's one of 2 ways you can go. You can leave, or you can get better and say, hey, I've got some of the chops. I've been rewarded handily before I had to prove myself. What can I do to get better in a better space? And we work with them and we train with them to do that. At the end of the day, you have to be metric based in a sense, because it's like the old saying, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it.
But, and I guess that kind of ties back to what we were talking about with the NBA players, sit in timeout, right? They have to have the enthusiasm to want to improve as well. If you want to be a great salesperson, you got to be willing to learn how to be a great salesperson, right? Nobody's born with it. That's right. Some people say they are, but nobody's born with it. You learn it somehow, whether it's from watching your parents, buy a car or, whatever it might be. Yeah. Have you ever read the book, Way of the Wolf?
Yes. I met him actually.
It talks a lot about those same things, right? The cold calls and a lot of that's about. It's interesting to read the book because it's not actually about. It's about building relationships and building a rapport with the person and learning what should you say when to get the outcome you're looking for.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is kind of it's a lot of sales isn't approached that way, right? It's you need to sort of. Feel the person's pain and then or let them express the pain and then you propose a solution to solve it. You just ask them if they want help. If they don't want help, then so be it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on about a couple of things, but it's interesting the way you're saying it. Not only is it spot on, but it's something that, fortunately for me, a lot of sales leaders, a lot of sales companies don't have that ethos, that focal point. I've been in sales my entire career, and it's never been said to my face, or I don't think I've been thought about. I'm not a hard sell. So if I can't make your life better, I give you something that helps provide value for you, I'm not interested, right?
Yeah.
And early on in my career, that was a struggle because I worked for very aggressive sales guys at some points that were like, no, you got to get the sale. I'm like, but they don't need us. Why the hell would I do that? Because go back to what I said earlier. Your best customer is an existing customer. I never want to sell or work with someone that I don't have the opportunity to help again down the line. Yeah. Now that said, what I've been very fortunate, my background is psychology and business, right? And sports and everything else. I've always been obsessed with the human condition around motivation and why people are successful and things like that. And maybe it was a way of trying to figure out how I could do it myself. But the way that I was trained by a guy named Dirk Gorman, who basically showed me you're not just a salesperson, there's a craft to this, right? And I like to say, based on my years of training with him, and he also, when I was a manager for him, he brought in two IO psychologists. And I had a psych background, some in college. I was in graduate school for psychology. And I was always fascinated by that. So I melded with these guys pretty quickly. But they did a heavy level of testing with us. And he came out with these 6 scores about personality. And anyway, the major part of it was empathy. And if you want to know if you ask me, what are the best key the sales guys of today, what's the key element that they all have? It's understanding the value of empathy and vulnerability and versatility. The best salespeople I know are versatile. They're more versatile than anybody. But to your point, what you need to do is that you need to find out what's personally important to people, right? So when I train people, I usually get a little bit deeper than just, you got to make a call, you got to make 1,000 cold calls. I teach people how to read body language, how to build trust on very short timelines. And this is all the kind of playbook that I've been using now for the last couple of years. And it's benefited us tremendously because my teams don't come off as the hard sell. They find out what are the pains really at. Now, keep in mind, there is something essential to that you said earlier, is that you need to find the pain that people are having, because people buy because of pain. Now, granted, we all buy discretionary items, here and there. People buy expensive cars, but more often than not, when you purchase something of any sort, you're buying to solve a pain, to solve a problem. Right. And if you can, through conversation, through the right questions and permission, find out what people's pains are. What the good salespeople, the best will show you. What I train on is that you need to find out that pain and bring it to the conscious level and make that person stay in the pain long enough to understand that the cost of staying in that pain is far more expensive than working with you or buying. Right. And there's something that is very, very, very particular about that, is that if you can't read empathy, if you can't read energy in the room, more often than not, a salesperson will find the pain and they go right into like, oh, this is why we're better. This is why we fix it. You can't do that, because at your point, you're not going to build a relationship that way. Right. Yeah. So the real sales leaders that I train, that I've learned the most from, they're the ones that have always taken the route of, it's a craft and you have to understand how to read, how to understand people, see the world through their lens, and understand the power of empathy. Otherwise, you're a commodity.
Yeah. And it's one of the ways that I've been talking to people, and I put it on my website, is when I'm trying to get people to join my training program, is I want them to not need me anymore. So my goal is to make them so good that they're not a customer of mine anymore, right? And and I feel like I've done my job, right? I've helped them get to the place they want in their career, get the skills they have, and then they don't need me anymore. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want, right? Because then what's going to happen is, hopefully they then refer somebody and say, hey, this worked for me, and that's the whole idea. But that's really interesting. Yeah, it's for those of you that we skipped kind of over the book a bit. So the book's called Way of the Wolf. It's written by Jordan Belfort, and you may not know the name off the top of your head, but you've probably seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street. That's the guy. That's Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's funny reading the book. That's in my head. I'm seeing Leonardo DiCaprio, the whole thing, and of course it's dramatized in the movie. But but really,
I met him in person. He came and spoke to us years ago in the city. And he is really that much energy. Like he's that good. But it's also, keep in mind, you had said it earlier, is that if you can find one of the things you mentioned, and I find myself for the last few years now really emphasizing with people, when I go to hire people, when I recruit people, and usually at the level I'm at now, I'm fortunate where I've got people to do that and everything else. But when I hire people, even to this day, I say, listen, I focus on the process, the actual skill set, right? If you're willing to work with us for a year, 2 years tops, I promise you, my promise to you is that you'll have such a process down that you can go to any company and sell any vertical, any product, and within a quarter or two, you should be in the top 8 to 10% of their sales force. That's how the process. It's product and company agnostic. Like most people out there that say, "Oh, I've been selling software for years and they can't do anything else." Or and if you look at my background, I've been using this playbook, but I'm one of those guys that was able to jump to medical, to pharmaceutical, to devices, to software, to all these things.
Right?
Yeah, the process is the same. Now, the funny thing is that when you really understand how to empathize with people and build something of value, it doesn't become that chic, like, oh, this is the slick salesman stuff, right?
Right.
Because the situation you and I were talking about when you're telling me about your business, when you meet someone for the first time, whether it be in person, on video, when you shake their hand, you say hello, there's a level of relationship tension that is at its height. It's at its peak because you don't know this person.
Right.
And as you're talking to someone, as you get to know them, it could be in a conversation or a period of time, that relationship tension starts to sag, right? It goes up and down and stuff like that. Well, when you're in an engagement in sales, for instance, the same thing. That relationship tension is up through the ceiling, right? Because at the end of the day, you have something that they want and vice versa. Now, when you're in a conversation with someone, it goes down. And when the first time they say no to anything, it spikes back up.
Yeah.
And the best salespeople, or the people that really know how to really work with customers, they not only recognize that, but they understand how to work with it. Whereas salespeople that don't, the second they get a no, you see this all the time in deals, for instance, right? You see all the time in deals where the person pushes back on the price or something and the salesperson panics. And what do they say? You know what? I got to get my boss. You know what? We can discount you 25%. Would that help? Then you've already lost the trust of the customer because they know that number that you were charging them is complete mirage.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if you say to them, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you something. Is there something else that I'm missing? You really play the empathetic role because the relationship tension is going to be high.
Yeah.
If you address that and handle that, you could slowly mitigate that. And then once that's lower, you always have that opportunity to say, hey, that's when it becomes clear path to work with each other. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that you see that in your business too, is that the tough part about the interesting thing about what you're doing is that when you're meeting people for the first time, communication is very different, right? So I train people, there's 3 levels of communication. It's words, tone, and body language, right? And the percentages of such are, if you read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. This is FBI data. This isn't Robert Gibbons data. In order of importance or order of level of communication, it's 7% words, 38% body language, 38% tone, and 55% body language. Now, when we're talking about what you and I were talking about earlier, when you're selling over chat or selling over email and such, you don't have the biggest component that you can read. That body language is not there.
Yeah.
It's also why people struggle selling over Zoom, because you're not in there. You can't feel that energy. So what becomes critically important that we have to train people on all the time is tonality, right? So think about where we are, Andy, in our careers. Think about if I was going before a giant sales force. So I get brought in, I get a nice fat check to speak to the entire sales force. Think about if I stood before them and said, I'm here to teach you about tonality. You know what I mean? You'd have crickets and people would boo you off stage. You know that?
Yeah.
But the truth is that you have to focus on those components. If you don't, if you're not understanding body language, if you're not understanding how to mitigate getting a no or anything like that, or realize the value in knowing that real negotiations, they don't start until you get a no. It pushes back because anybody can yes to death. But when you're able to teach people how to read that and not run from it, that's where the magic sauce is, I guess. That's the people that work for me or the people I've seen in the industry that do the best. They see the world through the lens of the person, not just themselves.
Yeah.
And it's usually good customers or even customers, they've spotted 70% of what they need to know about a deal before they even go to the deal. Technology and everything else. So it's our job to basically build that alliance, build that relationship, and can we do something where we can form a partnership down the line?
So yeah, I mean, a good salesperson that has a good process can sell anything, right? That's part of it.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, we were talking about Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's book, and the struggles he went through, and excuse me, and how he just had a product he believed in. He believed in himself. Actually, he didn't really believe in himself that much at the beginning, but he believed in what he was doing, the change the disruption he wanted to make.
That's right.
But the biggest thing that, one of the biggest things I've taken out of that book is you have to be really passionate about what you're selling to people. And you have just incredible belief, but that's a bit contrary, or maybe not contrary. I'm not quite sure what the word is, because if you're good at selling something, you could sell anything. But how important in that sales process is utter belief in what you're selling.
It's critically important. I would say it's critically important because I will say this, go back to what we're talking about with the way people are working and doing so much research on their own or stuff like that. I don't know about you. I think we both in this category though, but I can spot when somebody's not really invested or really confident in what they're selling, right? So to talk about Phil Knight, he had an utter belief, the fact that what he was doing was going to better the world, right? He was going to bring these running shoes to the world that, you know, people around the world were making for fractions of the pennies, but he wanted access to have them. If you go to that book, you remember that was his old track coach used to sit in his home lab and design the bottom threads of the shoe. And they're always right. That's right. They're always looking how it would be more comfortable and more aerodynamic. It was lighter on their feet. They're always looking to better the customer. And if you look at our best entrepreneurs of this day, they're taking on these massive problems that they feel like they can have a contribution to change it, to making it better. Salespeople in our world, if they don't believe in their gut, what they're doing is going to benefit the people that they're working with, it's palpable. You can tell right away. And personally, I make sure that we weed those people out, because what does exist in those people is a level of toxicity to the rest of your culture.
Right.
And then you get back into the point where the fastest way to lose great people is to tolerate a bad one.
Right.
You really got to open up to the fact that just because they bring in the most money or they're your number one salesperson on paper, how are they for your culture? How are they for your people? Because those are the people that they may bring a ton of money, but if they're toxic, they don't believe in the company. They don't believe in the product. Yeah. Because good buyers will feel that. They'll feel that energy and be like, well, why would I work with this if this kid doesn't believe it? You know? Yeah.
So how does that then how does that translate into the interview process and when you're recruiting people? How do you tease that, because they're new to the company? Like, how can they possibly have that level of passion for the product? How do you tease that out of them to see, well, is this person, you know, capable of that, or whatever it might be? Like, I've never hired a salesperson, so I don't know the answer to that, but I know how to find, in the work that I do, I know how to find if somebody's passionate, but not in the world of sales. And so how do you tease that out in an interview?
You don't.
Okay.
Well, you don't in the sense that you usually do. No, it's actually a great question, because this is the thing that I speak to people all the time. I think I have a process that works, and then suddenly it doesn't. And there's always a probability of the person we hired is not the person we're going to get, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
What you learn early on, and what I was able to pick up, is that I can't expect people to have that level of enthusiasm and passion about the company that I'm trying to hire them for yet. Right. They haven't earned that yet. What I try to look at when I'm hiring people, right, and maybe this is because I'm older and maybe I'm a little bit lazy, whatever job I'm trying to hire people for, right, whether it's sales, customer success, retention, I'm trying to find the people that have done what I need them to do already at a pretty high level, that somewhat early in their career, that I think I'm already looking for good that I can make great, right? When it comes to salespeople, what I'm looking at is a track record of success. So I look at resumes I read from the bottom up, and I read them in like 5 seconds, right? And what I'm looking for is just a track record of success. But more often than not with salespeople, you ask them, hey, how did you get to this spot? What'd you do to learn this? How'd you get to be this good? It's the story that's the outside of what they actually sold. So don't get me wrong. You and I are still from the day where you remember box scores in the paper, right? So good sales rep, if he's looking at a high ticket company, high velocity, a good sales rep resume should read like a box score. It should be one line about who I was and where I was. And then the rest of it should be winning, stats, numbers, President's Club, that kind of thing. But then you look past that to see, okay, what's this person's work rate? So if they don't work for us, they work for anybody. Are they the person we got to worry about getting out of bed, or are they doers? Because more often than not, doers don't need the job, right? You can convince them to join you because it's a picture of a better vision of what they're doing. But doers are already doing something other than what you need them to do that's already got them to where they are. If that makes sense. I don't want to confuse you. You already got, they're the ones that are looking at you in the interview, and they're not so much nervous as much as they are, hey, I'd be great for you, that kind of thing. They know they can add to the pie. And when you find those people, that's when you really link up, and that's when you build a partnership, because listen, I want you to make as much money as you can. I want to bring about the best version of you to this company. What do I need? What do you need from me to help you do that? Right. And once you do that, you kind of reverse engineer, then you build backwards. But you have to have a foundation that is already there, that speaks to where they're going to go after it, no matter whether you're involved in it or not, if that helps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. It's how much then does your sales process that you talked about, where you're trying to feel the pain in the individual and how can you help solve it. Do you look for them trying to sell you that way to hire them? Does anybody ever, when you interview somebody, does anybody ever treat you like they're trying to sell you?
Of course, because the good ones won't let you leave the room until they have a very good idea or confirmation that you think they're good enough for the role or that you're going to push them to the next level.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. I've hired hardcore sales guys in like the Bronx or Brooklyn, where this was years ago when I first started hiring people. And one of the tactics that I was trained on was to, halfway, 3/4 through the interview, look at the resume and look at the candidate and tell them that you're just not here in superstar, you're not here in success. And I said to this one gentleman, I'll never forget this. I said, you know what? The resume looks good and I like what I'm hearing, but you read the job post, right? The job rec. And, oh yeah. I said, it said we're looking for rock stars, right? It clearly says that. The guy says, yeah. And I said, you know what? I'm reading this and I'm listening to you. I just don't know if I hear rock star. And there was a pause. And the guy looked me right in the eye and says, well, maybe you're deaf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he used an expletive before that, but for the show, I won't use that. But
yeah.
And I just remember sitting back and be like, wow, this guy's good. But I hired him anyway. And he ended up being excellent. Because he was already a driver. He was already a doer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's going to be a success, whether it worked for me or for anybody else. Right.
Yeah.
So early on, they have to have that level of bravado. They have to have that level of self-confidence that's going to make sure that they're going to be great no matter where they go. So that said, the way I close that out is that the best salespeople, even the ones that are really good, they're not letting you leave the room until you give them some kind of confirmation that you're going to move them on or that they wouldn't be great with your company. And I, even now, I'll say to my team when they hire people, if it's a last hire and they're on the fence, I'm already questioning it because I train them how to look at these intangibles. But also when I meet with someone, even at the level that I'm at, they say, is there any reason why I wouldn't be a great fit for your company or something like that? That's putting yourself out there. Yeah. Right. I'm honest with people. I say, yeah, it may not work because of this. But usually it's like, yeah, no, I think you would be because they have that level of confidence in what they're doing. And don't get me wrong, they can speak to what they've done along the way where it's going to benefit the both of you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, I'm thinking back to, you just mentioned the question you asked that, you're looking for rock stars and you don't see that. I wish I knew that question. I've interviewed thousands of people for the company I used to help run. Yeah. And a lot of them are relatively new in their career. Most of them are relatively new in their careers. Yeah. But what would be really interesting is to ask them that question. I'm going to pass that on to the guy that runs recruiting there. And to see how do they handle themselves, because you're going to really fluster them, right?
You have to. That's exactly what you have to do. Because think about it. Nowadays, with ChatGPT, with internet, with everything, they can rehearse the best interview questions ever. What you need to do, and this is where the psych part comes in, it's great. You need to throw them off script. Yeah. And the faster you can do that, the better you're going to see what you have. Give you an example. I used to walk in when I was a mid-manager at this company years ago, and I was one of the hiring managers. And the first thing I used to do is I used to make sure that I had them structured to where they were sitting here, they were sitting, I used to structure the temperature of the room, all this crazy stuff, right? And the first thing I would do is when I walked in, I would deliberately make sure that I was a few minutes late. And then I would also make sure that the candidate had a copy of their resume and I had a copy of their resume. And the first thing I used to do when I got in there is crumple it up and throw it on the floor and see how they responded. Yeah. You know what I mean? Right away, you're setting a tone. I'll tell you what's another great question that I ask in a lot of interviews nowadays too. I say, listen, if you don't mind me asking you something, and you can answer from a personal standpoint, professional standpoint, it's completely up to you. I said, when was the last time you really devastated in your life or your business? And what'd you do right after? Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about great stories and seeing the humanity in people. That's where you really hear some amazing tales of what people have gone through. And not to be, macabre or anything, but I want to know that someone understands the value of the struggle, right? So I want that person to tell me, you know what? I came from a single family house and my mother didn't have much and I had to put myself through school. It used to be HR didn't like it when I did this. HR didn't like when I used to ask young kids, hey, how'd you pay for school? HR would be like, dude, you can't say that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. But I used to like asking that because that's part of a story. If they're younger people, that's probably something that they've had to face at a young age, that they came to a precipice like, okay, I can either go this way and someone writes a check for me, or I can put my head together and figure out a way to do it. And then you're starting to see the character traits of somebody, right? Mm-hmm. How do they handle things when they're not that fancy, or they're not that handed to them on a silver platter? That's what you have to find out. But the question I asked though about, when was the last time you were devastated? You get some really deep answers, and then you see why people are. You get an idea of the person you're dealing with. Another thing is I used to ask people, like when I was interviewing guys, I said, you ever been the best man at anyone's wedding? They're just simple questions like that.
Yeah.
Of all your friends, aside from your family, who trusts you the most? Why is that? And what they're doing is they're trying to explain themselves to you through the lens of someone else.
Right.
And you get to see where their ego is. Right?
Yeah.
So
I used to, one of the things I used to do, so we always asked people to give a demo. We'd give them a project to work on. They'd have to do a demo. And I would always interrupt.
Yeah.
Because then you really throw off the people that have rehearsed too much.
Exactly.
And I would, because honestly, I never cared what they actually demoed.
Yeah.
I cared about how they carried themselves, but then also, how are they going to handle an interruption? Because it's going to happen when they're doing consulting. They're going to get interrupted. And if they can't handle it in a safe setting like this,
then you're not going
how the heck are they going to do it when they're with a customer?
It's so funny you say that. I'll give you a little bit of background. I used to do the exact same thing, and it got out that I would do that. And what I would do is whenever I asked them, I would roll them the marker and I'd say, hey, do this. It was something that had pre-rehearsed. So what I used to do is I used to go through the interview and things I picked up, kind of nuances along the way in conversation, I would roll in the marker and ask them to walk through that. I'll give you a great story about this. So I had a guy, I was at Acutus at the time. No, I was at Ipswich at the time. And it was a large sales force, predominantly in-house. And we had BDRs, business development reps. These kids, we could train the hell out of them. They used to bang the phones all day, right? And I got asked to take an interview with a friend of a friend with this one gentleman, and his name was Jordan, all right? And I remember seeing him. He looked through the window when other people were talking to him. He looked very, very nervous. And I went in there, and he couldn't look me in the eye at all. And he had a suit and tie on. He had everything rehearsed perfectly. But through the I literally couldn't get this kid to look at me. And finally, I said to him, I started talking to him like off the cuff. I pushed the resume away. I said, Jordan, tell me about yourself. And he started saying about his family and stuff like that. And he told me how he put himself through school by working at Home Depot. I said, Jordan, this is interesting. You telling me that you put yourself through school, but you only worked in Home Depot a couple of years. I said, not for nothing. I don't care. But what's the rumpus here? What's going on? And he got really quiet. And he put his hands on the table. And I noticed earlier the way he had ripped off numbers. I'm like, okay, this kid's there's something on the left side of this kid's brain. And he looked at me, finally looked me in the eye. He said, I'm really good with numbers. I said, really? I said, so what are you doing? He says, I day trade from my house. I've been doing it since my sophomore year of high school. And had issues with social stuff, but completely, savant. I rolled on the marker and I said, walk me through how you invest in a stock. And for the next 10 minutes, this kid gave me a tutorial on it, which I got smarter. I hired him on the spot. Yeah. And he ended up being arguably one of the best BDRs I've ever hired at any company. Oh yeah. Because once I gave him the playbook and he understood it and he tailored it to him, he booked more meetings than anybody. Right. So it's finding that thing in people that they're fired up about that they've had to overcome. Right. Yeah. If you can do that in an interview, you're working with good fire because the best people you hire, Andy, they're going to teach you stuff. Yeah. Right. I'm long past the guy that wants to dictate, overwhelm, and dominate the people that work for me. That doesn't work anymore. You hire the people that are going to tell you that this is what you need to know. This is why I'm as good as I am. And they're going to teach you more about how to be better at what they do. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. I gotta wrap it up here in a second, but a couple of questions, back to basketball. We gotta start and end with basketball. So you played professionally in Europe, right?
Correct. Yeah. Overseas.
If you could change one thing about your basketball career, to have you play professionally in the NBA, okay, what would you do?
I would just do more of the things that I figured out were much more valuable when I played overseas. So when I played overseas, my later years of college, I got very good at defense. Okay. I was always a great passer, but I learned how to play defense from a phenomenal head coach and a guy named Kevin Stallings. And when I went over the pros, I tried to score, I tried to do this. And then when I realized I got in a situation where I was playing with Magic Johnson and I got put into a role where they already had a big center. He was like 7'2". They had all these other guys. They needed me to come in and be a great post defender and a great rebounder and such. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to try and stop doing all these other things, just focus on that. Mm-hmm. And it ended up working. And I ended up having a career of doing that and got to be known as this guy that could guard any big man on the floor kind of thing. Yeah. I probably would have focused on that more. Right. In my team. And also, truth is, I played 4 sports a year up until my sophomore year of college. Having the career I had and growing as fast as I did, I probably would have played more basketball, even though I played.
Yeah. I mean, that's Dennis Rodman made a career of that.
Yeah. Well, Dennis Rodman, that's another guy. Arguably one of the most underrated work ethics you've ever seen in the NBA. Yeah. Hands down. So keep in mind, I got really lucky. If you've seen The Last Dance, I got really lucky because their last run, when they brought him on the team, That's when I was in college, right down the road. I went to Illinois State and they were in Chicago. One of our managers started work with them when he came on board. And their whole job was just to make sure that he stays out of trouble. And that guy, after even the biggest home games, used to go in the locker room after they would do the talk with Phil Jackson, go in the locker room, say hi to his teammates, whatever. He would take a Pearl Jam CD and go in the weight room. He'd lift weights for about another hour, hour and a half. Then he'd go on the treadmill for another 45, 50 minutes. Then he'd go take a shower. Car was waiting out back, and he'd go right to the club.
Yeah.
That's how that guy, he just outworked everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can tell when he was on the floor, he never ran out of energy.
By the way, you know who else was like that I was fortunate enough to bump into and meet and watched him work out was Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
The work ethic in that guy was just the most understated thing. And don't get me wrong, he's blessed with talent, but people don't realize how much of it is actually work ethic and discipline. The talent is one thing, but to watch that guy work out after practice, for another 2 hours, it was just, I'm like, oh, okay. Now you understand why it makes sense that they're as good as they are too.
All right, last question, and you have to take a stand on this one.
Okay.
Kobe or Michael?
Michael, all day long.
Why?
There's no doubt. Well, for starters, you look at the number of.
There'd be no Kobe if there wasn't a Michael. I guess that's one reason.
Sorry, you said Michael or Kobe?
Yeah,
I'd say Michael, only because I just thought Michael had what he came from and what he was able to do was a little bit different than Kobe, right?
Yeah.
And I thought Kobe had a better supporting cast, which I'm not trying to take away from Kobe. The better question is, what I get more often than not, is LeBron or Michael.
Right.
And I still say the same thing.
Yeah.
I say Jordan all day long, all day. Because keep in mind, right? Kobe too. Mike went to 6 finals, won every one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Multiple defender players of your scoring titles, your MVPs. I mean, it's just like the all-around game. Yeah. He was just ferocious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great, Robert. Thanks for joining me. I love this conversation. It's probably been my most fun podcast recording so far, but don't tell the other people that have been on the podcast before. So because we got to talk sports. So
that's right. Always hit me up.
I love sports. I kind of have to be as an American, right? And I have to love sport. Yeah.
Right. Now you're into a different sport over there because it's all football.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I will chat with you soon.
Definitely, man. Thank you so much. It was great.